So we were talking about that visit you had with your grandmother in the hospital just before she died.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a huge event for you. Tell me some more about how that was.
Well, what's really interesting is since I last saw you, as I learned more about my grandmother, I learned some stuff that I actually didn't know about her. And what I found out was that, she was, my father grew up as an only child and my grandmother as a single mother. My grandfather had left when he was 3 or 4 years old, and apparently he worked on the boats on the Great Lakes. And then he returned when my father was about 21 or 22, something like that. I was maybe a year old. And the story in our family is that my father had dropped out of school in grade 10 in order to support his mother. And what's interesting is you never question sort of that story. And recently I learned that, because I never asked the question of, so how did she earn a living? And discovered that the way she earned a living in the 1930s was as a prostitute. Wow. And that was really interesting. And I got this from one of my sisters who found out the details from my stepmother. All my sisters and my stepmother went on a trip to Mexico, and I guess they got into this. And so I got the details when I visited my sister in Edmonton. So that was really interesting to find out that detail about her.
So you've learned a lot about your grandmother recently from your sister, and one of the things you learned about her was that she earned her living as a prostitute.
Yeah, and used her own house. So my father, as a child growing up, heard other men in the room next door, and people would come and go. And in fact, apparently some of these guys were family friends. So it was all very interesting. Because the thing is that that's not the image you have of your grandmother. And so it completely goes against any sort of grandmotherly kind of image I have.